Companies are key to solving climate change. That is why WWF is working with the companies in our Climate Business Network to reduce their emissions and secure a future where people and nature thrive. Our Beyond Net Zero roadmap lays out the path for companies to follow. It aims to help them achieve their targets and go beyond, by taking meaningful action and helping to restore our planet's natural systems. We don't just tell you what to do, we show you how to do it. Beyond Net Zero includes 7 key leadership actions. Each action has the metrics you should use, the processes you should follow, and some examples of best practice you could include. Our partners are part of a growing group of companies that have clearly understood the science, the benefits of cutting emissions, and the risks of inaction. We think other companies could learn a lot from their example. In this video, we'll be going into detail on the second and third leadership actions within the Beyond Net Zero report. And we'll be talking to Henrik Sundberg, the Climate Impact Lead for H&M Group. But first, let's set the context and find out more about H&M's science-based targets. What are they?
Yeah, so we have science-based targets covering our Scope 1 and 2 emissions that are a reduction of 56% by 2030 from a 2019 base year. And we actually have the same science-based target for our Scope 3 emissions as well. So by 2030, a reduction of 56% from a 2019 baseline. So on top of that, we also have a net zero target for 2040, and that's also validated by the Science Based Targets Initiative. So according to their definition then, and a reduction of 90% from a 2019 base year as well. So when you look at our strategy, we have kind of built it into 4 different layers that we then structure our work around. So the first layer of this pillar then focuses on measurement, accounting, disclosing, basically showing what the emissions are, and then being transparent and disclosing this in a credible way. So that's kind of the base layer of this. The second layer of our pillar is focusing on reducing emissions. So here we focus on the actions taking to take these emissions down and actually reach our targets. The third pillar focuses actually on beyond our value chain. So our measurements and our targets focus on our value chain, what we need to do connected to the products and the services we have. But we also have to look beyond our value chain and protecting natural sinks, like we do, for example, within the Leaf Coalition work that we have. Or building a future market for carbon removals, where we know for our net zero target, we will need removals as a piece of that. But currently, there is not really a viable market for it. So taking a responsibility of building a market for that is a crucial part of our third pillar, focusing on beyond value chain as well. And the fourth and final pillar is focusing on advocacy. So we can do a lot ourselves, but to reach our targets and as a company, as an industry, and as a planet, we really need to collaborate and work together. So focusing on advocacy and industry collaboration is really a key piece here as well. And that also extends to advocacy and policy work we do to get policymakers on board with this and making sure that governments around the world also implement the right policies that helps us transition into and follow our targets.
It is important for companies to have a strong strategy that includes every element of their business. If we want to hit our global targets, we can't afford to wait for action. It needs to be happening on multiple fronts, and it needs to be happening now. We need concrete, scalable solutions. Let's hear from H&M about what they're doing to make their reduction strategy more concrete.
So it's important to focus across the value chain and work on all the pieces of the puzzle, but we also have to focus on the big emission sources. And for us in our industry and as a company, that is on the product side. So producing the things that we sell, and that covers roughly 60% of our emissions. But if we zoom in on that, there's basically 2 key elements here to what we're doing. It's focusing on energy efficiency, so use less energy, as little as possible when we produce, and renewables, so clean up that energy that has to be used. So those are kind of the 2 main pieces. Seems simple, but to achieve this, there's a number of other things that we actually need to come together. electrification then. So trying to electrify the processes that today uses thermal energy, so that burns coal or natural gas to produce heat. Those needs to be electrified. That's one really important piece of this puzzle. To be able to electrify and use that, we need to have available and a stable electricity grid. And then once we have a stable grid that we can use, renewable capacity that we can actually use on these grids is, of course, crucial to get the emissions down. So together, these pieces can build up to a reduction, together with the energy efficiency, the electrification, access to this electricity, and then having that cleaned up and renewable. That is together kind of driving this change. And to complement this, we can also say that circular business models like resell and being able to sell products without having to produce a new one is also going to be an important piece in complementing this as well. And when we look at the full production, we should also consider the materials, of course, that we use, the fibers. And we can clearly see recycled fibers being an important way of actually reducing emissions, but also contributing to a lot of other positive sides here. So closing the loop as much as possible using recycled fibers that come from preferably textile to textile recycling will also contribute a lot to this reduction.
Oftentimes, people can get frustrated by what they think is a lack of action. They don't realize the complexity of the process. It is not as simple as just swapping products or services. First, companies need to build their data story, and to do that, they need the data. Let's find out from H&M what problems they overcame when it came to gathering data.
So the lack of data can definitely be a challenge, and this is something we've been working on for quite a long time. We've taken a big step here recently and changed both kind of the data and been able to increase the number of suppliers of our tier 2 suppliers. So that's our suppliers basically, that we get into that we get data in from to our systems. And because a large share of our emissions come from these suppliers, these tier 2 suppliers who do a lot of the dyeing and the wet processing work, that will be a crucial piece for us to have the actual data for and have access to that. And on top of this, we have also built a new model to much better capture the processes that each garment and product goes through. And this will also help us much clearer capture the benefits of the actions we've already taken and the actions we are planning to take. So measuring the improvement in impact. But we can't expect to have perfect data before we act, but must rather act now and with urgency to make the changes, and then rest assured that we will be able to capture these improvements later when the data and the models kind of improve to capture that. And I think a clear example here is for materials, where we are in the situation right now. We have to rely on average data for fibers, as we don't have traceability down to an individual farm to capture the specific emissions from that. And that leaves us with some actions that we're able to measure the impact of. We can move from virgin cotton to recycled cotton, and in that way capture a change in these kind of average emissions from these two. But we cannot capture an on-farm intervention like better agricultural method or like regenerative agriculture, for example. But we still engage in these activities because we know that we will need these improved resources in the end, and that we will at some point be able to measure the impact of this.
Once you have the data to inform your plans and you have the strategy in place, another difficult challenge companies face is to unlock the funds needed to make the transitions happen. Some companies have set up dedicated budgets to invest in those reduction plans. What is the benefit for H&M to having a budget like this?
Having a dedicated budget where we focus purely on delivering on our climate targets and reducing emissions, that's really been a game changer for us, I would say. By evaluating the return on investment from the interventions we make based on the emission reduction per dollar rather than an expected financial return on each one, that means we can really focus on getting reductions done, getting these interventions done, but still be efficient. We're efficient in the way that we pick the low-hanging fruit in terms of reductions per dollar spent. So I think that's really strong, that we can both deliver on it while still being efficient within this kind of framework then. And having this budget separated from all other budgets also gives us the strength to keep this action or the budget focused on the reductions and not need to compromise between other priorities. And I think it's also good to add here, going back to what we said on industry action and advocacy, that when it comes to financing emission reductions in our supply chain, we can't do it alone. We need to come together as an industry and collaborate and do this together. Because when we make an intervention today and we only have a share of a facility that we use, so let's say 10% of a facility's capacity that we actually use. When we then go in and finance an intervention in this facility, only about 10% of the emission reduction ends up in our books, meaning that about 90% of the reduction goes to someone else. And we know that it's key to work together to achieve these targets. So we cannot wait till we have a perfect financing solution in place. We continue to make these investments, but we really strive to find a way to work together with other brands and other companies to get this financing in place.
As we can see, the H&M Group is working on delivering on Beyond Net Zero leadership actions that are in line with what the science tells us we need. With the Beyond Net Zero guidance, WWF is showing every business how to step up and become a climate leader by striving to maximize its contribution to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We urge your business to commit to net zero and go beyond.